Bullies knocked him down. Now they're begging for mercy. Miguel Reyes kept his eyes on the cracked linoleum floor as he navigated Westridge High's crowded hallway. At 15, his scrawny 5'6" frame and pronounced limp made him an easy target. 2 months at this new school had taught him which hallways to avoid and how to become invisible. "Hey, Gimpy, where you think you're going?" The booming voice of Jason Taylor cut through the noise. At 6'1" with the build of a varsity linebacker, Jason commanded attention. His cronies, Rick Donner and Kevin Walsh, flanked him, creating a wall of muscle that students instinctively avoided. Miguel's heart sank. He'd avoided them for nearly a week. Without looking up, he quickened his pace toward history class. Just 30 feet away, he didn't make it. A hand clamped his shoulder, spinning him around. His backpack slipped off and crashed to the floor. Books and papers scattered across the hallway, triggering scattered laughter. "I'm talking to you, Gimpy," Jason said, towering over Miguel. "Don't you know it's rude to ignore people?" Miguel finally looked up. "I have class," he said quietly, bending down to gather his belongings. Rick kicked a notebook further down the hall, drawing more laughter. "Oh, he has class," Kevin mocked in a high-pitched voice, like anyone cares what this freak does. Miguel felt the familiar burn of humiliation creep up his neck. He hadn't done anything to deserve this. He just wanted to be left alone. "Leave him alone," a female voice called out. Lily Chen, a junior who sat next to Miguel in advanced math, stood nearby clutching her textbooks. "You're going to be late, Jason." Jason's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mind your business, Chen, unless you want to join the freak show." Lily hesitated, then hurried past. Miguel couldn't blame her. Everyone knew what happened to those who intervened. "See? You're at lunch, Gimpy," Jason said, shoving Miguel against the lockers before walking away with his friends. Miguel gathered the last of his papers and limped into class just as the bell rang. He slid into his seat at the back, trying to steady his breathing. Just 3 more years, he thought. 3 more years, and I never have to see any of them again. What nobody at Westridge High knew was that Miguel's life before moving to this suburban nightmare had been anything but ordinary. The pronounced limp they mocked wasn't from birth, as most assumed. It was the result of a gunshot wound to the thigh at 13 while training with his father. Miguel Reyes was the son of Gabriel Reyes, one of the most respected MMA coaches in San Diego. Since the age of 4, Miguel had been in the gym daily, learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, and wrestling. By 12, he'd begun competing in junior tournaments, showing natural talent and discipline. Then came the accident. A stray bullet from a neighboring shooting range had torn through the gym wall during training, catching Miguel in the thigh. The damage had been severe: torn muscle, shattered bone, and months of surgeries. The doctors had warned that he might never walk normally again, let alone fight. For a year, Miguel had fallen into depression. Then, guided by his father's patience, he'd begun adapting his fighting style to accommodate his new limitations. What? He lost in explosive movement. He gained in technical precision. What he couldn't do with his injured leg, he compensated for with upper body strength. But at Westridge High, none of that mattered. His father's words echoed in his mind daily. "You don't use what you know unless there's no other choice. Fighting is for the ring or for true defense, never for pride, never for show." So Miguel endured. He absorbed the taunts, the shoulder checks, the scattered laughter. He'd promised his dad no fighting outside the ring, not after what happened at his old school when another boy had pushed him too far and ended up with a dislocated shoulder. The incident had contributed to their move, to this fresh start that had turned sour so quickly. Just keep your head down. Don't engage, it's not worth it. But with each passing day at Westridge High, that promise became harder to keep. The cafeteria at Westridge High resembled a nature documentary, different species clustered in their natural habitats. The athletes commanded the central tables. Theater kids claimed the space near the stage entrance. And then there were the strays, students who didn't fit neatly into categories, who sat alone at the periphery. Miguel had firmly established himself among them, claiming a small corner table near the emergency exit. Today, however, the library was closed for inventory. With nowhere to hide, Miguel sat hunched over his lunch tray, methodically working through bland pasta while reviewing physics notes. He sensed Jason's approach before he saw him, a subtle shift in the cafeteria's noise. Miguel kept his eyes on his notes, hoping against hope that they might pass by. They didn't. "Well, if it isn't Professor Gimpy," Jason announced, dropping heavily into the seat across from Miguel. Rick and Kevin flanked him, creating a wall that cut Miguel off from the rest of the cafeteria. "Studying hard? Trying to earn that scholarship?" Miguel said nothing, marking his place before closing the notebook. Experience had taught him to protect his schoolwork during these encounters. "Asked you a question," Rick said, reaching across to flick Miguel's forehead. "Yes," Miguel answered simply. "Physics quiz." "Ooh, physics," Kevin mocked, grabbing Miguel's chocolate milk and opening it. "Bet you think you're smarter than everyone." "No," Miguel said, watching as Kevin drank his milk. "Just trying to pass." Jason leaned forward, his bulk casting a shadow across the table. "You know what I think. I think you do think you're better than us. Sitting here all quiet and mysterious." Several nearby students had turned to watch, sensing entertainment. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Miguel said quietly. "Then prove it," Jason said, smiling slowly. He pointed to a freshman girl sitting 2 tables over. "Go ask her out, right now, loud enough for everyone to hear." The cruelty was precisely calculated. Public humiliation for Miguel, and for the unsuspecting girl who would become collateral damage. "No," Miguel said firmly. Jason's eyebrows shot up. "No? Did Gimpy just tell me no?" "I'm not doing that to her," Miguel said, calculating exits and obstacles between him and the doors. "Find some other way to entertain yourselves." For a moment, genuine surprise registered on Jason's face, quickly replaced by something harder. "Oh, you're definitely doing it. Unless you want us to tell everyone about how you were crying in the bathroom last week." It was a lie, but Miguel had seen this tactic work before. "Make something up if you want," Miguel said, gathering his notebook. "I'm not bothering someone else to amuse you." What happened next occurred so quickly that many observers later couldn't agree on the sequence. Jason grabbed Miguel's tray and shoved it hard into his chest, sending pasta sauce splattering across his white shirt. As Miguel stepped back, Kevin stuck his foot out, catching Miguel's bad leg. His knee buckled, sending him crashing to the floor. Pain flared through his injured leg. Through watering eyes, he saw Jason rise, towering over him with a smirk. "Oops," Jason said, triggering laughter from his friends. "Gimpy took a tumble." Miguel started to push himself up when Rick stepped forward. "I've always wondered," he said with casual cruelty, "if you could kick a field goal with someone's head." Before Miguel could process the words, Rick drew his leg back, aiming directly at Miguel's temple as if his head were a football teed up for a kick. Time seemed to slow as Miguel watched the foot approaching his face, heard the collective gasp from watching students. In that split second, years of training took over. Miguel's body reacted before his mind could fully engage. He rolled toward the kick rather than away, robbing it of force while simultaneously grasping Rick's ankle. A sharp twist of his upper body, leverage applied at precisely the right point, and suddenly Rick was the one airborne, his body flipping completely before crashing onto a nearby table that collapsed under the impact. The cafeteria fell silent. Miguel was back on his feet in one fluid motion that belied his supposed disability. His stance had changed, weight distributed evenly, hands relaxed but ready, eyes alert and focused. The transformation was so complete that several students later swore it looked like a different person standing there. Rick lay groaning amidst broken plastic and scattered food. Kevin stood frozen, mouth agape, and Jason's expression had shifted from amusement to confusion to uncertainty. "What the hell?" he finally managed, looking between Miguel and his fallen friend. Miguel said nothing, his breathing steady and controlled. Something in that movement must have triggered Jason's pride, because his face suddenly hardened. "You're dead," he snarled, lunging forward with a wild punch aimed at Miguel's face. Miguel slipped the punch with minimal movement, pivoting slightly on his supposedly weak leg. As Jason's momentum carried him forward, Miguel delivered a sharp, palm strike to his sternum, just enough to send him staggering back, gasping for breath. "Don't," Miguel said quietly, the single word carrying through the silent cafeteria. Kevin, finally breaking from his stupor, rushed forward awkwardly. Miguel stepped inside his reach, hooked a foot behind Kevin's ankle, and used the boy's own momentum to send him sprawling to the floor. 3 moves, 3 bullies neutralized, and Miguel hadn't even thrown what most would consider a punch. He stood alone in a small circle of clear space, surrounded by stunned faces. Teachers were pushing through the gathered crowd, drawn by the commotion. Miguel's momentary satisfaction quickly faded as he saw the approaching faculty. He had broken his promise, he had fought, and now there would be consequences. "Dad is going to be so disappointed." As Vice Principal Donovan broke through the circle of students, Miguel straightened up, relaxed his stance, and resigned himself to what would come next. The hard plastic chair outside Principal Wagner's office had become uncomfortably familiar to Miguel over the past 2 hours. Inside the office, voices occasionally rose enough for him to catch fragments. Clear case of self-defense, 3 against 1. Zero tolerance policy. His father sat next to him, silent and contemplative. They hadn't spoken much since Gabriel Reyes had arrived at the school. Just a brief exchange. Are you hurt? No, sir. Did you start it? No, sir. Did you finish it? Yes, sir. His father had nodded once, then squeezed his shoulder before disappearing into the principal's office. The office door opened, and Principal Wagner, a severe woman with steel-grey hair, gestured for him to enter. Inside, his father sat across from the principal's desk, flanked by Mr. Donovan and Ms. Patel, the school counselor. "We've been discussing your situation," Principal Wagner began. "This is a complicated case. We have 17 student witnesses who've provided statements," Mr. Donovan said, tapping a folder, "plus footage from the cafeteria security cameras. The accounts are remarkably consistent." Ms. Patel leaned forward. "Miguel, why didn't you tell anyone you were being bullied?" The question caught him off guard. "It wouldn't have helped. You don't know that," she countered gently. Miguel met her gaze directly. "With respect, Ms. Patel, I do know that. Jason's father is on the school board. His uncle is the football coach, and most teachers look the other way when varsity athletes misbehave." Mr. Donovan started to object, but Principal Wagner held up a hand, silencing him. "I've been here 2 months," Miguel continued. "I've seen how things work. I've seen other kids report bullying and nothing happens except they get targeted worse." A heavy silence followed his words. "Regardless," Principal Wagner finally said, "fighting is against school policy. Zero tolerance." Gabriel Reyes shifted in his chair. "With respect, Principal Wagner, my son defended himself from what could have been serious injury. That boy was attempting to kick him in the head while he was down." "I understand that," she replied. "The 3 young men involved will face serious consequences. However, we still have policies which exist to protect students," Gabriel interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "Not to punish them for protecting themselves from harm." "May I say something?" Miguel asked quietly. All eyes turned to him. "I made a promise to my father that I wouldn't fight outside the ring," he said. "I broke that promise today, and I accept whatever consequences come from that. But I want to be clear. I didn't hurt them. I could have, but I didn't. I just stopped them from hurting me. There's a difference." Ms. Patel studied him with new interest. "You train in martial arts?" "Yes, ma'am, since I was 4. Which explains how a boy with an apparent disability managed to incapacitate 3 larger students without throwing a single punch," Mr. Donovan murmured. Principal Wagner tapped her pen against the desk. "Here's what's going to happen. Jason Taylor, Rick Donner, and Kevin Walsh will receive 2-week suspensions followed by a month of detention. They'll be removed from all extracurricular activities for the remainder of the semester, including sports." She turned to Miguel. "You will serve 3 days of in-school suspension starting tomorrow, not for defending yourself, but for not reporting the ongoing harassment. Additionally, you'll attend weekly meetings with Ms. Patel for the next month." Miguel nodded. It was more lenient than he'd expected. "There's one more thing," Principal Wagner continued. "Mr. Reyes has made an interesting proposal that may benefit our school community." Miguel looked at his father, questioning. Gabriel smiled slightly. "I've offered to run a 6-week self-defense workshop for students and faculty, focusing on awareness, de-escalation, and only as a last resort, physical self-defense. Principal Wagner has agreed to make it an official school program. And you," Principal Wagner added, looking at Miguel, "will assist your father in this program. Consider it community service." Miguel blinked in surprise. "Me?" "Yes, you," his father said. "Who better to demonstrate that physical limitations don't have to make you vulnerable?" For the first time that day, Miguel felt a spark of hope. This wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a chance to be seen as something other than a target. "Yes, sir," he said. "I'd be honored." Word traveled through Westridge High with the speed and distortion of a game of telephone. By the time Miguel returned from his 3-day suspension, the cafeteria incident had achieved mythic proportions. His first day back was surreal. Students who had never acknowledged his existence now nodded as he passed. Some looked afraid, others curious. A few brave souls approached with questions, which Miguel answered politely but briefly. Lily Chen caught up with him between classes, falling into step beside him. "So," she said without preamble, "you've been holding out on us." Miguel adjusted his backpack strap. "Not really, nobody asked." "Fair point." She studied him with newfound curiosity. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you stood up to them. Jason's crew has been terrorizing people for years with no consequences. Until now," Miguel said, allowing himself a small smile. "Until now," she agreed. "Listen, a bunch of us study together in the library on Thursdays. You should join." The most dramatic change came during lunch period. As Miguel entered the cafeteria, conversation momentarily dimmed, then resumed at a higher volume. He kept his head up, walking purposefully to his usual corner table, only to find it already occupied by a group of freshmen who froze at his approach. "Sorry," one of them squeaked. "Is this your table? We can move." "It's fine," Miguel said. "Room for one more?" They exchanged glances, then scooted apart to make space. Miguel sat down, feeling oddly like a celebrity. By the end of the week, a new normal had established itself. Miguel was no longer invisible, but neither was he the center of constant attention. Students acknowledged him, teachers checked in more frequently, and the halls felt marginally safer. The first session of the self-defense workshop was scheduled for the following Tuesday. When they arrived at the gymnasium that afternoon, over 40 students were already waiting, along with 5 teachers. Miguel spotted Lily among them, as his father addressed the group, outlining the philosophy behind their training. "The best fight is the one you avoid." Miguel surveyed the faces before him. Some he recognized as frequent targets of bullying. Others seemed like ordinary students curious about self-defense. When the time came for demonstrations, Miguel stepped forward, forcing himself to stand tall despite the familiar ache in his leg. His father had chosen him to demonstrate how leverage and technique could overcome size and strength disadvantages, a living example of the workshop's core message. For the next hour, Miguel moved through techniques he'd known since childhood, explaining each movement. He demonstrated how to break a wrist grab, how to create distance from an aggressor, how to fall safely if pushed. With each explanation, he saw understanding dawn on previously uncertain faces. Near the end of the session, his father called for a volunteer to attempt a simple hold on Miguel, which he would then escape from. Hands shot up across the gym. "Miss Chen," Gabriel said, pointing to Lily. "Would you assist us?" Lily stepped forward, looking both nervous and excited. Following Gabriel's instructions, she grabbed Miguel's wrist with both hands, planting her. "Feet as directed." "Now," Gabriel addressed the group, "my son will demonstrate how to break this hold using minimal force." Miguel met Lily's eyes, giving her a reassuring nod before moving through the escape technique in slow motion, explaining each step. "Remember," Gabriel concluded, "what we teach here isn't about hurting others or seeking revenge. It's about personal security, confidence, and knowing that you have options when faced with threat or intimidation." When the gym had finally emptied except for them, his father began collecting the mats. "You did well today," he said simply. Coming from Gabriel Reyes, those 4 words carried the weight of a lengthy speech. Miguel felt warmth spread through his chest. "Thanks, Dad." "How does it feel?" his father asked after a moment. "Being seen for who you really are?" Miguel considered the question. "Different," he finally said. "Good different, but strange." Gabriel nodded. "It's always easier to hide, takes courage to be known." As they packed the last of the equipment, Miguel realized something had shifted inside him as well. The limp that had defined him in the eyes of others now felt like just one aspect of a more complex whole. For the first time since the accident, he felt fully himself. 2 weeks passed before Jason, Rick, and Kevin returned to school. When they finally returned, they were met not with their usual deference but with a new wariness. Miguel saw them first in the main hallway before homeroom. He had been chatting with Lily about an upcoming physics project when the crowd parted slightly, revealing Jason standing 20 feet away, flanked as always by Rick and Kevin. The 3 froze momentarily upon seeing Miguel. Lily tensed beside him. "Want me to get Mr. Donovan?" Miguel shook his head. "It's fine." He held Jason's gaze steadily, neither challenging nor submissive. After a tense moment, Jason broke eye contact first, muttering something to his friends before turning down a side corridor. Throughout the day, whenever Miguel encountered any of the 3, they gave him a wide berth, avoiding direct interaction. Miguel was returning his lunch tray when he noticed Rick alone by the condiment station, struggling one-handed with the lid of a soda bottle. His other arm was still in a sling from the cafeteria incident. Without thinking, Miguel approached. "Need help with that?" Rick's head snapped up, eyes widening in surprise and a flash of fear. He quickly masked it with a scowl. "I'm fine." Miguel shrugged and turned to leave. "Wait," Rick called reluctantly. He held out the bottle. "Actually, yeah, thanks." Miguel twisted off the cap and handed the open bottle back. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Not as enemies, not as friends, but as 2 teenagers acknowledging each other's existence without hostility. "How's the shoulder?" Miguel asked. Rick adjusted the sling. "Doctor says another week in this thing, then physical therapy." He paused. "Coach says I might miss the rest of the season." That sucks, Miguel said and meant it. He knew the anguish of having physical ability stripped away. Yeah, well, Rick shifted uncomfortably. Guess I had it coming. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. That thing you did, Rick continued, lowering his voice. In the cafeteria, is that something anyone can learn? Miguel studied him. Most of it, yeah, with practice. Your dad's workshop. Is it still Tuesdays and Thursdays, 3:30 in the gym? Rick nodded slowly. Maybe when this heals. Maybe, Miguel agreed. Understanding this was as much reconciliation as he could expect for now. The final confrontation came 3 days later, as Miguel was retrieving books from his locker after the final bell. He sensed someone behind him and turned to find Jason standing alone. Got a minute? Jason asked, his voice gruff but lacking its usual aggression. Miguel closed his locker, positioning himself with his back to the wall. What do you want? Just to talk. Look, I'm supposed to apologize to you, part of my behavioral improvement plan or whatever, so, yeah, sorry. The words carried all the sincerity of a hostage statement. Miguel almost laughed. Is that it? He asked. Jason's jaw tightened. What do you want from me, man? I said I'm sorry. No, you said you're supposed to apologize. That's different. Something flashed in Jason's eyes. Anger, frustration, possibly even shame. Fine. I'm sorry I called you names. I'm sorry we messed with you. I'm sorry Rick tried to kick your head in. Happy now? Miguel considered him thoughtfully. Why did you do it? Any of it? The question seemed to catch Jason off guard. What? Why me? Why anyone? What do you get out of making people miserable? Jason opened his mouth, closed it again. I don't know, man. It's just how things are. No, Miguel said firmly. It's how you choose to make things. A tense silence stretched between them. Finally, Jason shrugged, some of his defensive posture deflating. Maybe. Look, we're not going to be friends or anything. I don't need your friendship, Miguel replied honestly. Just your absence. Leave me alone. Leave the younger kids alone. And we'll never have another problem. Jason considered this, then nodded slowly. Yeah, okay, deal. He started to turn away, then paused. For what it's worth, that move you pulled on Rick was pretty badass. Thanks, Miguel said simply, as Jason walked away. Miguel felt a chapter closing. The bullies who had dominated his life for months now seemed smaller somehow, less mythic. Outside, the late afternoon sunlight bathed the school grounds in golden light. Miguel spotted his father's car in the pickup lane, right behind the Chen family's sedan, where Lily was loading her backpack. Hey, Miguel, she called. We're getting pizza before the student council meeting. Want to join? Yeah, he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. I'd like that. As he limped toward his friends, and they were friends now, he realized. With quiet amazement, Miguel felt the weight of victimhood fall away completely. The limp would always be part of him, a reminder of what he had endured and overcome, but it no longer defined him in his own eyes or in the eyes of others. He was Miguel Reyes, son, student, fighter, friend, complex and complete. And for the cow, first time since coming to Westridge High, he felt like he truly belonged.